The Last Jedi was a very confusing movie for a lot of different reasons. Now, before I get into this topic, I want to warn you that we are going to talk spoilers for The Last Jedi in this video. And pretty much every video I cover about The Last Jedi from now on, and even this whole week, is going to be a spoilerific video. So just understand that. I have a non spoiler review up if you haven't seen the movie yet, but everything we're going to talk about from now on is spoilers. And I want to discuss the one thing about the movie that's getting the most criticism, and that is the story of Rose and Finn and why this did not work. Now, what I want to talk about is not so much the Canto Bite stuff, because every reviewer that has discussed the film has already kind of broken down why that's bad. Besides just the wink, wink, nudge, nudge political agenda that Disney had with this scene, talking about rich people and the 1%, and kind of hammering that home, and the whole like preserving of animals and things like that, which normally I wouldn't really mind too much, but it just kind of went nowhere in this movie. I've said this in my original review. I did like very much the. I like that there are people in the galaxy who profit off war, and they're selling weaponry to both sides. I like that idea, that concept. I think is a great concept, and I hope that they do explore it more in 9. I really do, because that's a great idea in my opinion. But what I want to talk about specifically is Rose, and Kelly Marie Tran. I love her. She is really entertaining to see when she's out in the public, and she seems like a really lovable girl, very lovable person. But a lot of people were saying that the Rose character in this movie was the worst thing about the movie, and that her acting was bad and this and that. I'm not so sure about her acting, but I know that the script, when it comes to her character, was not very interesting. From the beginning when she first meets Finn, that scene was decent, but it was also kind of dumb because she figured out how the First Order was able to track them on hyperspace, but she's just a lowly mechanic. Like, it didn't make sense to me that they figured that out so quickly. And that was one thing that was kind of weird. Now, what I'm not really understanding, what I think was really dumb, and we're going to get to the big problem later on in this video, because there's a big, big, big problem when it comes to this movie sending the audience mixed signals. First of all, just off the surface, the fact that she's pretty much in love with / obsessed with Finn, even though he's only been in the Resistance for like, I don't know, a few hours, maybe a couple days. I think only a few hours, is weird to me. But it's also not weird because, the whole subplot of this movie, the whole theme of this movie, or one of the themes, is about hero worship. And, again, it's that meta narrative where you worship Luke Skywalker, but he's not the kind of guy who you think he is. You worship, Supreme Leader Snoke, and he's actually kind of a dick to you in Kylo's perspective. In this case, she worships Finn, and Finn actually turns out to be greater than what she had expected. And, the thing about the movie is they try to create this love story where she really loves Finn because of the time they spent together, but they never really showed that to us because their scenes are so inconsequential that you never really see her sort of reacting to his actions in that kind of way. Like, they didn't really give those two characters time to breathe and kind of get together, because they're always either talking to somebody or they're racing those Farthiers, those horses, or, galactic horses or whatever, in that never-ending story scene. They never really gave the characters time to breathe, with the exception of the one scene where her and Finn are together looking at the animals being abused, and the whole, that whole scene, which to me was clouded. Like, the idea behind that scene was to make us kind of, I guess the idea behind that scene was to make us know more about her history, know more about Canto Bight and the people there. But, and the whole political thing. But really, I feel like any kind of connection she had to Finn would have happened in that scene, and it just didn't come off like it did. And so at the end of the movie, when she pretty much saves his life. She rocks him with her ship, and then before she passes out, she kisses him, which is just a very cringy, very, very cringy, that whole scene. I have major problems with that scene, okay? And it's not even the fact that she's kind of hero worshipping Finn and all that. That's part of the problems with that character. The thing I hated about that scene is he's going to sacrifice himself for the Resistance by ramming his ship into the big Death Star tech or whatever it was, that big cannon. She stops him from doing it, and she says, we should not hate the ones. What did she say? It was like, we should not kill the ones we hate. We should save the ones we love. And that is maybe the worst line in the entire movie, because that line completely undermines not just what Star Wars has been about, but also what that same movie, the lessons that that same movie teaches us, okay? Her whole thing was Finn should not sacrifice his life to take out the First Order, that he should not do that, that's a problem. He should not sacrifice his life for the Resistance. The problem is that in that same movie, in that very same film, we kind of see characters doing that constantly. In fact, right before that, we see Vice Admiral Holdo on the ship. She hits the light speed, which crashes through the Snoke ship, sacrificing her life so that the Resistance can get away. So the movie literally tells you that true heroes sacrifice their life, or are willing to sacrifice their life. And so when you look at the story of Finn, right, the character arc of Finn is that he was a stormtrooper. He left the First Order to become a good guy, which was, again, even I have problems with that, even because I felt like in Force Awakens, one of the issues with that movie is that he became good and rebelled against the First Order, even though he had been brainwashed as a kid and just all of a sudden figured out they were bad during that first mission, which, I mean, I guess that could happen, but the film didn't really explain that too much. I was hoping they would get more into it. In this one, they just dropped it completely. So he leaves the First Order. He's running from them, but then at the end of the movie, because he cares about Rey, he's willing to go to Starkiller Base with Han Solo, with Chewie, to save her. And now in this film, he's actually willing to sacrifice his life for the Resistance. Like, if you remember the promotional for Force Awakens, I've got nothing to fight for. In this movie, he shows he has something to fight for, and then Rose just stops him from doing it, and so tells him that, you shouldn't do that because we should save the ones we love. Well, that's exactly what he was doing. Why would you tell him that not to save the ones he loves if he was probably going to ram into that thing to save the ones he loved? It wasn't like, the film didn't make it seem like he would have failed in doing that. For all intents and purposes, had he rammed his ship into that, his speeder into that, it would have taken it out. And it didn't. And I find that to be very weird. Especially since the very next scene, you have Luke Skywalker come out and confront Kylo Ren in a hologram. And the film does not make it clear whether or not Luke was self-sacrificing or not. There's two ways to look at that scene. One is that Luke knew that using that much force would kill him, but he had to do it to save his sister. So he sacrificed his life for his sister, for Rey, for Finn, for Poe, for the Resistance. The other one is that he didn't know it would kill him, but when he did it, he was just doing it. He knew it would drain him. He didn't know he would die. And then he just died afterward at peace, but he died afterward. But it wasn't really a self-sacrifice. It was more like his body gave away, but at least he would die nobly versus being a disgrace, right? Like that actually worked for me. It's just that Luke Skywalker's character up until that is a problem, but that actually worked. So what you have here with Rose is you have a character being very contradictory, a scene that is sandwiched between two other scenes that tell you that this is what it takes to be a hero. And I think the problem with this movie is that there is no hero's journey. I'm going to do a separate video about how Rey is now for certain a Mary Sue. That's not even a question, but look at some of the other characters besides just Rey. Like Poe. Poe learned a lesson in this movie, and that was, don't be so reckless. But at the same time, he was never really reckless in its predecessor. Then they kind of played up the whole thing where they made it seem like, and again, this is all very subtle, that Poe did not respect Holdo because she's a woman. They didn't actually say it, but they implied it. And to me, that was very, very, again, I hate movies that do stuff like this, especially sequels, because in the first film, Poe had nothing but respect for women, especially General Leia. So you would think that in this film, he would have respect for one of General Leia's closest advisors, and he didn't. So that whole thing was just a very bad subplot. Like, that was just bad. But Poe Dameron did indeed learn a lesson from the whole movie, so there was some growth there. But where's Finn's hero quest? What is he even going to do in the next movie if his arch nemesis, Captain Phasma, they had subtly built up that that was going to be his rival, his feud, is now gone. Is she going to come back and lose to him again? Just seems like a waste of that character. And when it comes to Rey, Rey is just getting better and better with a lightsaber with no formal training at all. And Supreme Leader Snoke, I'm going to say this from my other video about Rey, but Supreme Leader Snoke kind of explains that when Kylo Ren was growing in power, the Force, and this is weird the way it's explained, so I could be wrong about this. The Force kind of counteracted that by giving Rey so much power. But why did it happen so fast? And why did it take 20 years or so in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope for A New Hope to appear? You see what I'm saying? It was like 17 years in between those two movies, and the Force took its time. Like, that didn't make any sense. Like, they didn't explain that. But I feel like the problems with this movie is that it's sending too many mixed messages, and that it's sending too many subliminal messages that a lot of people have picked up on, and that's not what Star Wars is about. The problem with this film is that it tries to be political, and it tries to be, kind of edgy in a way, but they forget that Star Wars is a very humanistic story that isn't about religion or politics, even though there is a little religion and a little politics, because obviously the Force is a religion, Jedi, Sith, they're all religions, and politics is all over Star Wars. But it's not about that. It's about the human characteristics. We can relate to being abandoned, which is one thing the movie did do pretty well, which is talk about Rey being abandoned, even though I wish they would give us more information. We can all relate to trying to figure out who our fathers are and why we make dumb decisions. That's good stuff. And this movie chose to kind of not really focus on that. So that's what I have to say about that. The Rose thing was just kind of pretty badly written, I think, and really cheesy. And it's just weird to me that Rian Johnson wrote this movie. I wonder, I heard that there really was no studio involvement as far as his story, even though I'm skeptical of that because that last scene in the movie seemed like very, very Disney. But I just feel like this movie it's such a far cry from the things that J.J. Abrams had established. No matter how much you hate Force Awakens, he established things. And I think that's another reason why people don't like it. So that's what I have for you. Hope y'all have a good one. Subscribe if you haven't. And I'll talk to y'all more about Star Wars in the coming days, I'm sure. There'll be less to talk about because I'm very disappointed. I don't hate the movie. It was just a big disappointment and, kind of undermined the trilogy. But I'll talk more about that later. Hope y'all have a good one. Let me know if you agree. And if you don't, that's okay too.